Today, my first guest is someone I know better than anyone, my husband, Adam Archuleta. You've seen him, the football player, the CBS analyst, the competitor, but today you're going to meet the real man behind the grind. Adam, we live in the same house, and this has taken us forever to get going and started. Why is that I finally got you?
Well, listen, as we've gotten to know in this long journey that you and I have been on, married 15 years, been together for 20 years. I think that with three kids and all the pets and animals that we have, I think it's
And
evident
tortoises.
in tortoises that listen, it's hard. It's hard to find time for each other, and I think that's something that all couples and all families go through. But the good news is we love each other and we found a way to connect and I'm excited that you asked me to be on this.
Well, it was very important to really pick somebody super special that is an inspiration to me, that continues to be an inspiration, and you're that person. And so I have some really fun questions for you. And this is unfiltered, so you don't know what I'm going to ask you, and I don't know how you're going to answer. So I think this is scary for both of us, but let's go.
I'm
You
ready.
ready?
I'm ready. I can't wait. I
All
wonder
right.
I wonder if you're going to ask me something that you haven't asked me yet in 20 years. So
I don't think
this is
many
really
couple.
exciting.
Well, I mean, I don't think many couples do this. So it's interesting that it's probably questions that I would never ask you. So I'm excited to learn the answers, and some of them I know the answers to. So I think it's going to be fun.
All right.
Okay, so who is Adam, the human, when no one's watching? Who are you really? And this is really important. And I've asked my kids this all the time, our kids.
You're supposed to start out with easy softball questions that are easy to answer. You went to like one of the highest degree of difficulty questions that you could possibly get to right off the bat. So,
Well, I think it's important to sort of dissect who you are and get to know you first, and then we'll break it down as we go along. But if someone came and lived at our house for a week, saw your routines, how you eat, train, pray, rest, what would they walk away saying about you? Does your everyday life reflect the man you say you are? Whether that's a Christian, an athlete, a dad, or just Adam?
yeah, I mean, listen, you've known me for forever. And this is, I would say this is something that is an ongoing question. I think this is something that everybody has to come to grips with, and this answer has changed throughout the course of my life. And I think that's because of the answer to this question, I think is the why I've actually changed. If somebody were to really follow me around and uh, and really get to know me, other than not putting my things away or leaving things for you to clean up, they would say that I'm somebody that's deeply driven. I'm deeply driven to always work on myself to never really be satisfied. And I think, you were with me during this transition and this process for much of my adult life. I was always Adam Archuleta, the football player, because that was the identity that I created for myself. That's what gave me value. And that was my anything and everything in life, as you know. And if football was going well, then things were going well with me. If they weren't going well, then well, you've seen probably the worst of me. Um, when my career ended,
Well,
um,
hold on. We're going to get there. You're jumping ahead
well,
because
you're,
I
you're
have those questions for you, but it's a simple question. If somebody were in our house and they followed you around and then you walked outside of the house, are you that person?
I would say yes. So if I had to answer this simply, um, I would say that Adam Archuleta is a first and foremost servant for my family because
Mhm.
everything that I do, everything that I think about is always centered towards how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? Where am I falling short? What can I do better? And as you know, there are a lot of things that I can do better, but I really try to leave and wake up every day and reinforce my commitment to being the head of this household and being there primarily to try and fill your needs.
And I agree with that. And that's the raw truth of it all.
Not that
How
I
are you
always
with your,
accomplish it, as you know, but I really, at the end of the day, that's what I strive to be.
okay. Well, I mean, I think there's only 24 hours in a day. And I would say watching you, knowing you, you maximize those hours like nobody else. I've always said to people all the time, if I had your plate and somebody's asking you to jump on the trampoline or somebody's asking you to do speed training with them, I would have to be like, no, 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 because I would be so focused on what I needed to do and I wouldn't have time for anything else. And that's what I appreciate about you with our family is you'll make time to do something like this with me. You'll make time to do everything. And then you'll also get prepared for CBS. You'll get prepared for helping the high school coach. You do it all. And I don't know how you do it and how you maintain sort of the stress free attitude when you give us your time. But I think it's really amazing. And it's something that I aspire to be, that I watch you do. And my life isn't as busy as yours, even though it seems like it.
Well, I would beg to differ. Your life is pretty busy as well. I know. Um, but listen, you and I talk about this all the time. I think it's so important, and we've seen how fast life goes. With how our kids they get older. Jet's almost 17 years old now. And always to remind ourselves that when we have the opportunity to be present with our loved ones, to be present with our kids, to be present with each other, I think, that is really the most important thing because, at the end of the day, that's really what is important, not how busy we are, but, how we impact, each other and those that we're close to. So, plenty of ways that you've inspired me to do that as well.
Well, and it's crazy, but when we're dead and gone, we can't be buried with our cell phone. You're not going to take your beautiful cars with you or your house or even your loved ones. And if you're very, very lucky in the end, you'll have your memories. So I think we all just get so caught up and almost turning 50, I've taken a real good look at my life. And I think we've talked about this before. We're all like sort of you have most people learn that they have two lives once they know they only have one.
Yeah.
And we both started to live our second life, I think, fully, finally, right?
Well,
But
hopefully. I
no,
still
I know
think I fall short.
we
But
all
I don't know
do.
if you remember this, but really one of the turning points for me was I think Jet was 4 or 5 years old. And and I tell this story often, but it remember, as a man, especially a man that played sports, you always want to play catch with your son. But at that time, Jet was completely not interested in playing sports, playing ball. And so,
It was
the
like he was allergic to balls. He would run the other way and cry.
yes. And you remember, I always wanted to play catch with him. And I remember, he was interested, like most kids at that age, trains, superheroes, dressing up, all that kind of stuff, which can be pretty boring, quite honestly. And I just remember just as clear as day, we were sitting in the kitchen and I remember he was asking you and he said, Mom, can we play superheroes and play trains? And you said, well, Jet, I'm cooking right now. Ask your dad. And then he said, Dad only wants to play if it's catch. And
Oh, you're going to get choked up, which is okay. This is unfiltered. I remember this actually. I do.
yeah, and listen, that one hit home quite a bit. And
Mm.
I get emotional in my old age. But that, that hit me. And when he said that, it's so crazy to me how kids internalize things so differently. And so many times we project on our kids what we want to do and what we want them to be. And we got to remember they're their own person. And I remember that was a turning point that no matter what, from then on, whatever any of my kids wanted to do, no matter what I wanted to do, I had to drop what I'm doing and be fully present, fully engaged. And that really was the turning point.
And I think that was a God wink. And if, we could be true to ourselves and you took that moment and you made it your truth and said, I'm going to change this. then that's all you can do. And you did it. And I see it every day. Like I said, I mean, you are an amazing human being. I, I just can't believe I got so lucky. But okay, we're going to move on now. Okay, from walk
I
on,
think you're awesome too, babe.
yeah. From walk on to the NFL star. Okay. I was not part of your ASU career, but I hear so much about it. Some people actually liked you as the ASU player better than the NFL star. So, no scholarship, no guarantees. What made you believe you could do it at ASU? Was there a moment that you thought, like, I don't belong? I do belong? What did it feel like becoming the highest paid safety in the league? I mean, I want to ask you all these questions, but all these kids nowadays, they've got this hype. We've got social media now, we've got all these offers. Some of it I think feeds confidence, which everybody needs to believe in themselves, and I think that's a good thing. But what do you think about now? Like, is it easier or harder? And what was your journey like?
Well, there's a lot of questions there. Um,
I can't make it easy.
I think about this a lot, and I talk to a lot of people about this. If I describe myself, I describe myself as somebody that just naturally is pretty ordinary, and I mean that in the fact that I wasn't really born with any natural gifts or any natural talents that were, you know, obvious to the outside. But I always did have this unbelievable belief in myself. And I think that in my mind, literally, I didn't see things as I can do that, I can't do that. It was just a matter of this is what I want, and I'm going to find a way to do it. And I will be willing to pay any price, no matter what the cost, in order to get what I want. And I was never, ever, ever deterred. Now, certainly I was disappointed when I was a high school senior and I didn't get that scholarship. And it's much, much different then as it is today. Of course, with the social media, everybody knows where everybody stands. But there was a tremendous amount of disappointment. And really, for all intents and purposes, my dream was over. But all I needed was that opportunity, and all I needed was that one door to be open, and that came when Arizona State there was a graduate assistant, and I still remember his name. His name is Vince Delicio. He was a graduate assistant, and he called me in the spring of my senior year during Arizona State's spring football practice, and he said, "Hey, we've seen some of your stuff, and our linebacker coach would love to talk to you, and we'd like to talk to you about walking on at Arizona State." And I was in my mind, I said, "Well, this is in the days of 230, 240 pound linebackers." And
But wait, let me interrupt you. Back then, how did they see you?
well, that's a great question. Um,
Because
so
I want to give this in just in case there's some young, aspiring
yeah,
football stars. I just want them to realize how hard it was
yeah,
to get noticed back then.
yeah. So I had a lot of newspaper articles written about me. I was a good football player, but I just didn't at that time have the measurables, the real raw speed and size in order to project well at the college level. But I remember, and I owe my mom a lot for this. My mom would tell me to get all my newspaper clippings, and we made copies, and I wrote a letter to, a good 35, 40 different colleges um, across the country. And a lot of them on the West Coast, but and then at that time, again, there was really not the internet wasn't really a big thing. So emails and that kind of stuff didn't exist. I would actually cold call college coaches and tell them who I was. And, I had no idea what I was doing. And for the most part, they of course shut me down and said, "Yeah, well, we're probably not really interested. You should probably, look somewhere else." And so that's what I did. I sent all my information out, my stats, my newspaper clippings. And it just so happened that ASU actually looked at it and they dug a little deeper and they actually watched some tape of me evidently and thought, "Hey, this kid probably has, is worth a shot of coming here and walking on." So if it wasn't for me, and I'll say this, my mom didn't do it for me.
Mhm.
She made me do it. And so I had to put in the work. in order to send all that stuff out. And, all you need is one to fall in love with you. And that's what happened with Arizona State.
And Vince played a big part in that. And then
Yeah.
you were invited to the camp. And then tell
Well,
me,
I should go back. So really, there was a couple things that happened. I owe it to so the graduate assistant Vince, and then Lyle Setensich was the linebacker coach. And really, this is where I got to be grateful for a guy like Pat Tillman for paving the way, because at that time I didn't really know who Pat was. I didn't really follow Arizona State. I really didn't, and he was young. But when I went and I went there to meet the coaching staff during that spring practice, the linebacker coach took me in the meeting room and he actually put on tape of Pat, running around making plays. And you could tell that he was a smaller guy. I think at that time Pat was maybe 200, 205 pounds, which was tremendously light for a linebacker in college. And he was just making play after play. And I remember Coach Setensich said, "Hey, this guy's 200 pounds. Um, do you think you can do that?" And I think it was me seeing that on tape and saying, "Yeah, absolutely, I can do that." Now, of course, I didn't know how difficult that was or how good Pat was, but at the same time, I was like, "Yeah, I can do this." And I think seeing Pat, knowing that a smaller guy was that successful in college, it made it easier for me, even knowing the odds against it, that you know what, I can see that this can be done, and I'm going for it.
and then was there any doubt once you got on the field and it was your first time? Like, what was that like? The first time your cleats hit the, what is it, turf or was it real grass? You're going
It
to get
was
mad at me.
it was it was real grass back then. Jen, absolutely there's doubts. Um, you can believe in yourself, but there's always going to be self-doubt. If you set the goal high enough and you reach for something that is theoretically impossible, because at that time and place, if you set your eyes and your sights and you really commit, you don't really have the skill set in the beginning to compete. So you're always going to be overmatched. There's always going to be somebody that's smarter than you, faster than you, better than you, more talented, more gifted. That's always going to be the case if you stretch yourself enough. And so, yes, there are many moments that there were self-doubts. I remember my first, and I know that you don't get into the weeds of football terminology, but I remember it was
How do
one
you
of
know? I
my
have football for dummies. I read it
Yep.
every night.
I know, I know. But I remember it was our first, they call it 9-on-7 drill. And that's, for people that don't really know how football works, it's where the offense, it's 9 players on offense against 7 players on defense, or excuse me, 9 players on defense against 7 players on offense, and you're just working on the run game. So it's tremendously physical. And I got a chance, coach put me in there, and this was very early in camp. And I tell you what, the game was so fast and I was so small and I was so overmatched. I just got flat backed almost every play. I mean, I just got my butt whooped. And I legitimately remember telling myself, what did you get yourself into? And really asking yourself, can I really do this? Like I just got my ass kicked in a serious way. And I think everybody in life has that same conversation. Am I really cut out for this? Am I really good? Can I really put in the work? Can I really do and execute what I say I want to do at the highest level? And so, yes, I've had those conversations many times, but you got to get back to, who am I? What was I born to do? Understand that this is temporary, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to give it more effort. And sooner or later, I'm going to start to be able to show that I belong. And throughout that camp, I was never defined by my failures, but throughout that camp, I got better and better. I still wasn't, good enough, but I remember having a conversation at the end of camp with Coach Setensich, and he told me, he said, "You know what? I think if you had to, you could play this year as a freshman."
Mm.
And I tell you what, that kind of floored me because in my mind, I thought, man, I'm not good enough yet. But he saw something, right? Now, obviously, it was better that I redshirted, but just knowing that somebody else had a belief in me and somebody saw potential, even reinforced further that, you know what, I am on the right track. I am going to get better. And I just continued to have that mindset. So, yeah, there's self-doubts all over the place, but you've got to get rid of those thoughts and remind yourself, what you're fully capable of, and you have to go after it.
Yeah, I believe having that one person that can believe in you will really push people forward if they have that self-doubt. And I'm glad that you had that. And I feel like, there were so many God winks in your life. And sometimes we think that things don't work out and we get upset about it. But when a door closes, there's always one that opens. And in your case, that has been throughout your life.
Well, you know what? It's funny when you have the luxury of hindsight and you get a chance to look over, on your life and see how things played out. Um, if you asked me then, um, not getting a scholarship, not being one of the highest recruits, not getting the attention, not getting all the accolades, not getting, everything early, you know, nobody really wants that. But quite honestly, I look back on that process that I went through, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. In fact, yes, I went to the NFL, and I know we're going to get to that, and I accomplished things in the NFL and my dream and all that good stuff. But really, it was that 5 or 6 year journey at ASU where I really got to find out about myself, where I really built the foundation and the character and the work ethic and the belief. Everything that I am as a man today isn't because I played football in the NFL. It's because of that 5 years at Arizona State, that journey of really going through it and really pushing myself to places that I couldn't even conceive of that really has shaped who I am. And quite honestly, I'm more proud of that journey. Um, and that journey is more of a gift than the actual reward of playing in the National Football League.
Well, and I think a lot of people overlook that a lot of times it is the journey. Nothing, if you're given something, it's not the same as truly earning it and knowing the grind and the grit that went into it.
The journey, it is the gift, At the end of the day, um, you started out this podcast asking me who I am. And, you know, I could say former NFL player, but quite honestly, it's the person that I became, the man that I became during those 5 years at Arizona State that I wouldn't have had I been a top recruit coming out of high school. I wouldn't have had to prove myself. I wouldn't have had to grind and do all the things that nobody else would do. And so, quite honestly, again, my 17-year-old self was tremendously disappointed. But my 47-year-old self says, you know what, that is by far the best thing that ever happened to me and really has formed the backbone of every single thing that I do, whether professionally or as a husband or as a father. Um, that gift was priceless.
All right. So once you made it to the NFL, you were one of the highest paid safety in the league. Was there a lot of pressure? How did that feel? Did you feel accomplished? Were you nervous? Were you like, I made it? Like, what were your feelings? I'm sure all of the above, but just the initial.
There is an all the above component to that. We knew going into free agency that at that time that was the year free agency got delayed by a couple weeks because they were renegotiating the collective bargaining agreement. And so after those negotiations, the salary cap jumped up. And so we knew that, there was a good potential that I was going to do pretty well in free agency. And I remember it was twofold, quite honestly. Um, I was visiting Washington, and that was my first visit. But in my heart, I really wanted to go to Chicago because I wanted to play for Lovie Smith again. Lovie Smith was my defensive coordinator in St. Louis, And really I wanted to play there. And I remember having a conversation with Lovey before my visit to Washington, and he said, make sure you call me before you sign anything. And I said, okay. So once the offer came through, it was like, holy crap, like this is pretty awesome. But then in my heart, I was like, but I want to go play in Chicago, right? So I was conflicted in two ways. And when I talked to Lovey, I just remember him telling me that, that's something that you can't turn down. At that time, Mike Brown, who was a great safety already, they weren't going to pay me more than him. And he said, the Bears, they're not going to make anybody the highest paid anything.
Mhm.
And he said, unfortunately, I don't think that they're going to be able to do that. You got to take this deal. And so, on one hand, yes, I'm happy because financially everything's great. And really, I thought it was going to be a good situation in Washington. But on the other hand, in my heart, I was disappointed because I really wanted to play for Lovie Smith and the Chicago Bears again. So
Now, I was with you
you
during
were
this journey. This was
unbelievable.
this was a tough time to be with Adam Archuleta. And there are a couple of questions that I have to ask you about this time. Um, and if you want to talk about some of it, you can, and if you don't, you don't have to. But so there was pressure. We know Lovey. We love Lovey. Um, he's been a great mentor in your life, almost, like close to a father figure as well. You still talk to Lovey now. Um, so I know what that must have felt like. So when you get to Washington, tell me about your time there, how you felt, what you felt like was going on, where your mind was. Because I felt like there were some really, really dark times there. And it was hard. And I do remember you being in the locker room, and a couple of your football player friends said, "Do you got a girl?" And you're like, "Yeah." And I think they said something like, and you can quote them, "Well, you better stay with her because like nobody wants to be around you." Something like that, right? It was crazy. And
Yeah,
I'm just going to put it, and I don't know if you remember this, but we had this really cute little condo. It was in McLean, Virginia. I used to go to the butcher shop
yeah.
every week and get all kinds of meat. They thought I was feeding tigers, and I would make you food. And I was able to just need an airport. So I would go in and out, and I would stay in Washington, but I'd work in New York or Florida or whatever, East Coast. But for me, it was happiness because I didn't have to fly across country. And then I got to be there for you. And it was a great little fun place to be a part of. But it was hard. I remember making you dinner. I remember you going into the room and just watching yourself over and over again. I don't know if I could flash a picture, but you didn't cut your hair, I think, for a little while. Your hair was growing out. I just remember there were photos posted of you. You looked so mad and so angry and bitter, but I got to see that at home. And when you got home, it didn't leave. And it was really hard. And I remember I promised two people. One was your mom, and she could probably remember exactly what we talked about, but they just said, don't leave them. Don't leave them until the season's over. And I didn't know how much longer I could take. I mean, you would just come home, you wouldn't even look at me or talk to me. And I made that promise. I said, I'm not going to leave them until the season's over. And then once the season was over, I was on the first airplane out. I thought I already had that ticket purchased. No, just kidding. But go ahead. Tell me about your time in Washington. And I also want to talk about Gil.
Yeah. So, Washington, I think first and foremost, and this keeps going back to your first question, who am I? When you are defined, when I was defined 100% by my success as a football player, my self-image was I'm a football player. I'm the highest paid safety in the NFL. Everybody gives me attention. Everything was wrapped up in that image. That's who I was, right? And when the going is good, that's good. But then when things start to fall apart and this entire image that you created suddenly isn't there anymore, you take a look at yourself and you say, well, who am I really? And you tend to not really like who that is because you spend so much of your life and your time developing this ego of who you are. And once that's gone, you're sitting there with nothing.
But your true
So
character comes out in the bad times. You got to be able to show up. So where was your true character? You think you
I
got
didn't,
caught up?
I didn't, I didn't have a true character. And so, and you know this, as I look back, that's probably the lowest point of my life as a human being, even though from the outside looking in, I'm living my dream. I'm getting paid all this money. Really,
You
what
got this beautiful girlfriend.
unbelievable. Just no,
I'm
absolutely. No,
kidding.
you're right about that. I mean, you seem to have everything that you could ever want or ask for, but yet you are a miserable, just piece of you know what of a human, right? So, and I say this a lot, I spent so much of my life on this search and destroy mission oriented identity of just getting what I wanted. I didn't really, it's unbelievable that you did stay with me, but I had no ability to form like any real meaningful relationships with other people. Um, and so really it was, I play football. I'm awesome. And if you don't like me, then you can go pound sand or whatever it is. And really it was this egotistical, self-serving um, person. And again, when that was gone or that was falling apart, I was left as this empty shell. And so it is amazing. I'm not proud of the person that I was during that time in my life. There's a lot of things I'm not proud of. Certainly, I know this that I didn't treat you, very well during that period, and it is pretty amazing that you were able to stick with me through that time. Because as you know, it took a couple years in order to get over that and really start working on, who I was. Now, I'm gonna answer maybe a second part of this question. There were a lot of things going on in Washington that really made it difficult for me to perform and be the player that they brought me there to be. But I say this that I will also take responsibility and say that I wasn't mentally tough enough to be able to handle it. And so I believe that everybody in life at some point or another will get hit with something that they don't have the tool set in order to handle. And so, your system, your process of how to overcome is going to get challenged, and that process isn't going to work. And so you have to be able to find other avenues to get over it. And quite honestly, there's some situations in Washington where, mentally I wasn't able to overcome it. And instead of me focusing on the things that mattered and things that I could control, I put far too much focus on other things and let those things win. And ultimately, my career was destroyed by that. So, um, you know me, I'm all about mental toughness and I'm all about being able to overcome and pretty much every single time we and the way we think are more of an enemy than anything that's external.
So what was it about that time in Washington? What do you think it was? You've overcome so much in your life. What was it in that you couldn't overcome? Was it a coach? Were you injured? Was it, I mean, I know but I mean, are you able to talk about it?
You know, I think that's a multi-part answer. So there was you remember that concussion that I got in 2005 when I played for the Rams. You were there for that. And I was
Yes.
knocked out and I came to and I was in the ambulance like during halftime going to the hospital and and I think, that concussion, that was the fourth time in my career I had been knocked out cold and it was my third hospital stay. And I really truly believe that because my game was built around aggression and physicality, that after that concussion, I just still feel like my soul, like deep down inside, didn't want to do it anymore, quite honestly.
Well, and outsiders have said that you were never the same. Somebody very close, your own mother said that you were not the same after that. I didn't think you were the same. And I think you would question when you hit people.
I
You
think
just didn't do it out of, you know, you just didn't go hitting. You would think about it and you would probably get scared, right?
well, it's not a conscious thing, but when you really, if you really look at yourself and you're really objective and you evaluate yourself, you realize that you're not the same. Now, again, that's I think that's more deep subconscious. Now, your conscious brain says, I'm a warrior and I can do anything and there's nothing that's going to stop me. And you go out there with the intention of playing the same, but there's just that little piece. And when you're playing against, guys in the NFL that are as talented as they are, um, a guy like myself, you have to be, more than 100%. But so I do believe that my soul deep down inside didn't want to play football anymore. That was first and foremost. And then, I think I allowed situations in Washington to get the best of me mentally. The media certainly, wasn't a fan of Dan Snyder, and they used me and my contract as kind of a pawn in their war with Dan Snyder. And so, the negative media response to that contract, it really did affect me. Now it shouldn't. You should be mentally tough enough to handle that. And that's where I say that's my responsibility. But I didn't handle that well. And then, there are some things that were going on with the coaching staff, and this that it probably doesn't serve me well to really, really talk about, this many years later. But, I was up against some significant internal challenges on that football team that, again, I should have been strong enough to be able to handle those things. But I do think that just because of that little psychological component to, deep down inside, maybe not wanting to play anymore probably allowed me to, have a bit of mental weakness and I let all those situations come together and kind of dominate me. And that's really why I believe my career ended when it did.
Is there anything you would have told that Redskin if you could tell them now? Or do you think the cards unfold the way they were supposed to?
Well, they always do. I think God has a way, and I should rewind this, and this. At that point in my life and my career, God was not a focal point. Really, it wasn't really existent, quite honestly. My career, um, I was kind of the God in my life. And so,
False idols.
yes. So when you don't have that foundation, um, I think then things can go sideways pretty quick. And I do believe God has a way of humbling you and taking away things that you hold dear. I think, using the word false idol is a great way to put it. Um, that was probably one of the main things. And there were people in my life at that point that were trying to push me more towards that and get me to see that. I started to listen a little bit, but it really wasn't a big focal point. And I put that as a major contributing factor to why I was so unhappy um, when things started to fall apart.
So, is there anything you would tell your younger self, like
Yeah.
how to handle that if you could?
Well, first of all, remember what's important. Get to know God first and foremost. Let that be the foundation of your life. Worry about things that you can control. Focus on being present. Don't focus on things that don't matter. Focus on joy. Focus on making sure that you really are as present as you possibly can be in this exact moment. And don't worry about any other circumstances. Don't worry about any other results. Just be the person you were when you were at Arizona State, when all you were worried about was the process and not worrying about all the other things that were going on. And so, that's easier said than done. And but certainly that's where I would start.
Is there a part of you that thinks, well, I mean, I feel like we kind of talked about it, but do you think that was a career ending concussion? Would you say that? Would you like confirm that and say that that should have been your last hospital stay with a concussion?
Again, there's a lot of things. I said earlier that there's most players that are playing in the National Football League truly are freaks of nature that were just born with an unbelievable amount of talent that I couldn't really conceive of. And I had to create my talent. And so, and I always use this example, and I use my friend, Terrell Suggs is a great example for this. Terrell Suggs was, I think he was put on this earth to play football. I mean, the guy is so physically gifted and just he has the perfect mentality to be an excellent football player. So a guy with that many just natural gifts, and of course he had work ethic, but I'm not talking about that. Just the natural gifts. Guys like that lose 10%, they're still better than everybody else. And they could still go out and play at a high level for a long time. Guys like me that were kind of maxed out, that I squeezed every single drop that I could have. If I lose 3%, 4%, 5%, then I'm done. Right. And so I think that, with the back injury that I had that was lingering, the concussion part of it that really told me that, hey, deep down inside, this enough's probably enough. Those things, could I still go out there and play? Yes. But I just do think that it took enough out of me that the combination of all the above, I wasn't able to go out there and play as effectively as I did when I was much younger and able to throw my body around and play with a certain physicality and aggression that was necessary for me to be successful.
I agree. Um, Let me ask you another question. Do you feel like, I mean, now we're creeping up on 50. I know that you had to like being so disciplined. I mean, this was a dream of yours since you were 4 years old. I know that. Coming from Green River, Wyoming, is there anything you feel like you regret or you missed out? You had to turn down so many, I don't know if you'd say fun things, but like peer pressure and all that stuff, like in college and parties and all the things. I mean, I feel like sometimes we've talked about this. I've lived such a life in a world of like sort of partying that I've had enough. And it's kind of like there's some places that you've even been to certain states and you didn't get to see them because you had to go to your room and you were so disciplined in watching film and the bed checks and all the things. Do you feel like you missed out? Do you feel like, how did you say no to things?
I don't know if I feel like I missed out. I, I think that your question falls into the category of balance. People talk about having balance and being whole. Um, I to do what I did, um, and to go from a pretty average 17-year-old to at least athletically and numbers wise to go be up there with some of the best in the world. In order to go from that transformation, there's no such thing as balance. You have to be all in and you have to be extreme. And I think, you're only able to get balance in your life once you've achieved a certain level of comfort, and so you can afford to have more balance and to be more whole. So I don't really think that I missed out on much. And quite honestly, my idea of fun now at almost 50 is much different than it was back when I was 24, 25 years old. I certainly, if I could construct myself and build myself from scratch, I'd say, hey, yeah, I would love to have more balance and be more well-rounded, but that just wasn't my path.
But I mean, even your first Super Bowl, that was my first Super Bowl. That was your first Super Bowl. It was in New Orleans. It was party, so much fun, so exciting. I know there were some St. Louis Rams at the parties and the Patriots, and you were nowhere to be found.
Yeah, it just, well, I was probably nowhere to be found because, socially I wasn't very good. And it took me a while to feel comfortable around different groups of people. But
Your ego didn't kick in yet, this football star that
it was
everybody.
just about to come out. But listen, I'm not perfect. There's places in my life where I've been tremendously disciplined beyond belief. And there's other places in my life, and I think this happens to everybody. Just because you're really good in one area and you seem to have a pretty good formula for success doesn't mean that that translates into other parts of your life. So, again, at that time, I was exceptional in some areas, but I fell quite short in other areas. So, I do think that's just kind of the journey of being a human being. I think that's part of the joy in life. And there's a lot of places, even at 47 years old, that, even to this day, and I feel that I really fall short on, and that I really need to work on certain things, and I really have to get more out of life, and I have to, continue to challenge my way of thinking and challenge the way I do things, and know that,
But you
hey,
don't feel like you missed out on anything.
the one thing that if I honestly that I think I missed out on building and maintaining a lot of really cool special relationships that I was able to, people that I was able to meet and come in contact with, whether that's coaches, players, other people out in the community. I was not good at building relationships, and I'm not able to draw upon a lot of those relationships at this point in life because I just wasn't there. And so I wish I had more of a relationship connection to my past as a football player than I
Mhm.
currently do.
Okay, so if anybody's listening out there and you want to build back your friendship with Adam Archuleta, he's ready, right?
Yeah, just email me, get a hold of me. I'm ready.
Your
Yes.
number's still the same?
It is. It is.
Uh-oh, what if you get some of those, I don't know, old high school sweethearts calling you or college sweethearts? I might have started something that I didn't want to start.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
so
you're safe, hon. I think you're
I
safe.
am. Everybody's moved on.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so let's talk a little bit about your training. And our son is doing that training and a couple of football players through the high school. So, what was that like? I know Jay, he's he's amazing in so many ways and he's hardcore. What was it like to work with Jay and what was that first meeting like with Jay? And I remember a story of Jay not allowing you to come in the workout room and tell me what made you stick it out. I mean, because I know the workout room and I've been there and the gym. It's nothing special. I wouldn't be sitting outside for hours upon hours thinking I was going to get this amazing training. So, what made you like stick it out? And thank God you did, right? Would you contribute that to a lot of your success as far as make it in the NFL? And tell me a little bit about your pro day and things like that, the exciting stuff that people really want to hear and how you felt and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I knew, remember when I met Jay and when I was going through this journey as a young man, really it was the dawn of the internet. And so the internet, it was still, AOL dial-up. Um, and so really, to get information was a much different than it is today. And so, long story short, I had read an article in a very obscure magazine called Powerlifting USA that my parents bought for me for Christmas as a Christmas gift. And I remember reading an article that Jay had written in that magazine, and just saying to myself, "Hey, this guy really knows something." And so I did what any 17-year-old would do. I actually they had his phone number in the magazine, and I called him. And I told him I had read his article and that I was interested in it, and he proceeded to tell me that that was for advanced powerlifters, that I shouldn't be doing that. And it just so happened that we lived 15 minutes from each other. And so I went in to meet him, and yeah, it was a unique experience. Jay is, imagine the if you've seen Karate Kid and Mr. Miyagi, right? Imagine the Russian version of that. Jay was kind of obsessed with, Russian Jay's not Russian, but with Russian athletes and
Mhm.
was really into the Soviet and the Eastern Bloc training. But he made it tough on me, and he did not allow me to work out in his gym. Um, but I just remember my instinct. Again, you got to remember in the mid 90s, my instinct was this is how elite athletes train. Like you have
Mhm.
to be hardcore. If I want to do what I say I want to do and I have to transform, then I've got to do every single thing that this guy tells me to do, no matter how extreme it sounds, but like I've got to be all in. And I never questioned it. And, a lot of people who I had exposed this type of training to, it was too much for them and they just didn't really understand it or see the need to continue with it. But for me, I knew that instinctively that I had to become one of the fastest in the world and I had to be physically at a completely different level. And I just knew that this was the only way to do it. And so that's really kind of how I met Jay. And, I don't think people really understand what we did. Remember, I was a 17-year-old kid that ran a high 4.8 40-yard dash, which is about as slow as you can be. I was a good football player, but still ran a 4.8. There could be somebody out there, but I don't think there's anybody who started at 17 years old where I was physically. And then 5 years after that, 6 years after that, testing for the NFL scouts in the combine, running a 4.37 40, a 3.83 short shuttle, bench press 225 31 times. I don't believe there's anybody in the world documented who's ever done something like that. Um, the guys that are running that fast at the NFL combine were always fast. You know, I put up numbers that are, pretty normal for NFL standards. But those guys who are doing that now today, those guys were always that gifted. Those guys were always that fast. So they're just, that's just naturally who they are. But I was a kid that went from the bare minimum to really among the best in the world. And so for that, I owe Jay and his training and all the things that he put me through. I owe many thanks to him.
And do you have like a journal or a diary anywhere that, you could say I was doing this and then I was doing this? Did anybody keep track of that? Did Jay do before and after pictures?
Well, no before and after pictures.
That's too bad.
You know, I maybe if I did another regret, it would be that I didn't keep some sort of a log. Uh,
Hmm.
Now it's interesting you say that. Um, so Jay, when we first met, he wouldn't allow me to work out with him. So he said that he would write training programs and then I would do them on my own, and then I would meet him once a month, and he'd write me new training programs. And so after the very first month, I called him and I said, "Hey, I'm finished." And he said, "Well, bring in your training log, and we'll go over all your results." And so I didn't really know what he meant. So when I went in to see him, he said, "Where's your training log?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about." And he proceeded to cuss me out for 30 minutes in front of everybody in the gym and tell me that I wasn't dedicated and I didn't have what it took and all that stuff. And so from that point on, for the next 6 months, in order for him to write programs for me, I did have to write a training log. And so in that log, I had to record what time I woke up, my resting pulse, my resting blood pressure. I had to record any dreams that I had,
Wow.
my body weight in the morning. I had to write down the time and every gram of protein, carbs, and fat that I ate throughout the day. And then for my workout, I had to have somebody with a stopwatch record the speed of the concentric portion of every rep that I did for every exercise. So, concentric is the pushing action. So from the bottom of a bench press to the top, I had to time it. Same with a curl or a squat. I had to write the same thing, my body weight at night, my blood pressure, my pulse.
That's a lot to think about and do your schoolwork
Yes.
and play high school football. So you were very dedicated. Were these programs expensive? Was it hard to afford back then?
But, we didn't come from much, and we didn't have a lot of extra, disposable income. At that time, if you can believe it, Jay charged me $50 a month for me to work out with him and to write programs for us. And so that was something that my mom was able to do and write that check every month. But that training log took me about an hour to an hour and a half a day to do. But that was the only way he would allow me to train with him. And so that was just, one more thing. But what's amazing about that process is what I learned about my body
Mhm.
was unbelievable. My body awareness of what was happening, how I was moving, the speed at which I was moving. That it was a hard process, but boy, did I learn a lot. And again, that's just one more layer to, the things that really form the foundation of who I am and what I believe and how to be successful in life.
And I find myself saying this often to people, but you're almost like a doctor. I think that was you in a past life or something, but I think you love the human body, how it works. I think you know how it works. And, usually you talk me off of a ledge if I think I'm dying, which is every other day. Okay, so moving on. Um, let's talk about Gil Bird, because I feel like Gil was a huge part of your life. I'm thankful for him. And I just want to hear more about him and his inspiration in Washington and what that meant to you and what that gave you and what it's given you even now.
So so Gil Bird was one of my coaches. Gil Bird was a great player in the 80s.
And I want to tell you something. You looked surprised when I remembered his name. Were you?
No, because we've
No?
talked
Okay.
about him
Because
before. Yeah.
he was such a big, I felt like such a big part of you overcoming Washington. I always remembered him and I'm always thankful for him.
Yeah, so Gil first again he was in the San Diego Chargers Ring of Honor, was a great player, and then he decided to get into coaching, and he was kind of our he started as an assistant secondary coach when I was with the Rams, and so that's when I first met Gil. And then Gil went on and he joined Lovie Smith's staff in Chicago. And so we reunited when he was in Chicago. And so Gil, really, when I think about his impact on me, was really when we start talking about the God piece. So Gil is a man that when you talk about his core identity of who he is, and he actually was the very first person to ask me the question, who are you? Right? And really dig deep on who that is. Um, but Gil is a real Christian, not a fake Christian. But Gil's a real Christian that walks the walk, and it's the foundation of everything he does in life. And at that time, again, that wasn't where I was in life. I wasn't really interested in the what you would call the Christian life. I was more concerned in all the earthly pleasures that I wanted.
Mhm.
Um, but Gil was always not in a preachy kind of way, but Gil had a way of always somehow, some way trying to talk about or integrate or find out where the areas that he could really try to bring me to Christ, quite honestly. Not very receptive to it, not very open to it. I wasn't um, antagonistic towards it, but it just wasn't where I was at that point in my life. And so I ended up, we talked about I went from St. Louis to Washington. We talked about my low point in Washington and where I was. And then when I got to Chicago, Gil was one of the assistant secondary coaches in Chicago. And that's about the time where I started to start asking questions and start to be more open because I think, deep down inside, I knew that, this was something that I had to learn more about. And so Gil was really one of the first people, and quite honestly, I would credit you in this as well. But because of his persistence, and he was really one of the first that, at least intellectually, got me to open up and start thinking about the importance of God, the importance of Jesus Christ, the importance of really having that strong Christian foundation. And so I really credit Gil for being one of the, and I say this intellectually, but like somebody who would sit down and really talk to me when I had all the different questions and all the different things that didn't make sense, that he was able to try to answer for me, at least my logical brain. But he got me primed for really wanting to go down that path. And so I really credit him for being an influential part of my life in that way.
Okay, so then you are in Chicago. You're with Lovey Smith now. Things are supposed to be amazing, right?
On paper.
And then what happens?
You know, what happens, things were going pretty well. Um, and I remember, I had done a lot of work as far as getting my mind back. Again, I do think that deep down inside, uh, at least physically, my soul said, football, you better really isn't for you anymore. But things were going pretty well, and I remember when it really happened. I believe it was the third game of the season. We were playing the Dallas Cowboys, and I believe it was on Sunday night football or Sunday night or Monday night football. And I was having a great game. I had an interception in the first half. I had a field goal recovery that I ran back. Had a bunch of tackles. Really having a great game. And I remember it was right before halftime. They were driving, and I remember I saw, Terrell Owens coming across the middle, and I went to go light him up. Well, he makes a move, and I just got cracked back. Sam Hurd, a wide receiver, just ear holed me from the other side, and I mean, it was I mean, he plastered me. I didn't see the hit coming, and I just remember my head was ringing, and I get up and I kind of shake it off, but man, he he got me pretty good.
You rung your bell?
Yeah, you could say that. He rung my bell. And so I remember for the rest of the game, I couldn't tackle. It was weird. Like I went from having a great first half to the rest of the game. I was out there and I just remember like asking myself, what's going on? Like I can't play this game. I can't play this game. And so then after the game ends, I go to the trainer and I said, hey, this my wrist, my hand kind of hurts. Well, evidently on that hit, he also not only did he ring my bell, but I broke my hand. And so then when I watched tape the next day, I realized, well, I'm trying to tackle people with one arm. And so of course, then it all started to make sense why I wasn't playing well. So not only did he ring my bell, um, it wasn't diagnosed because I didn't tell the training staff, but didn't I got a concussion, I broke my hand, and then,
And
I
why didn't you tell the training staff? Because you were afraid they would put you out of the next game?
well, you just, when you play football at that level, you just kind of get used to it. And so you have
You
this,
can't play with broken bones.
yeah, you just have this weird relationship with pain and or your body, where after a while you just don't, yeah, you feel it, but you have to get to a numb place where you still go out and play. I don't know how to, you almost brainwash yourself to where you're able to do these unbelievable things, and pain doesn't really register, quite honestly. I don't really know how to explain it, but you don't want to, it's almost like you don't ever want to admit that you're damaged in a certain way. It's in some ways it's very necessary, but in other ways, it really can affect you in a negative way. But
When I remember, you were so numb that evening that we had to do a photo shoot called Moves Magazine.
yes,
And you showed up at that photo shoot, and your hand it looked like Hulk.
yeah.
And we had to hide your hand. And I just couldn't believe that. And I'm going to try to show those photos, but your hand was so big, and I just couldn't believe. And then you played the next weekend.
Well, I didn't play the next weekend, but then I missed one game, and then I played the week after that. And I had played before with a cast on my hand. My rookie year, I broke my thumb, so I had to play part of the year. It's very difficult to tackle and play defensive back when you have your hand in a cast. And so I remember that really we ended up playing against the Minnesota Vikings, and it was my second game back with a broken hand, and we were playing. This was Adrian Peterson. Um, I believe it was his rookie year, but he ran for 250 some yards on us, and I remember trying to tackle him, basically one armed. It wasn't a good game. Let's just put it that way. And I remember it started happening again. Mentally, I started losing confidence. Mentally, like my thoughts started to spiral. It felt exactly how it was when I was in Washington. And again, I was mentally weak. I have no problems of admitting that, but I was mentally weak. I wasn't able to control my thoughts. They were spinning out of control. I started to lose confidence. And I do think that stemmed. I told you that concussion in 2005 was kind of the beginning of the end, but I do think that hit that that Sam Hurd put on me in that Dallas Cowboy game, I think it just reinforced, deep down in my subconscious mind that like, look, dude, like football, this probably isn't going to end well if you continue to play. And it was my conscious brain that did continue, but really, I do think, there were other forces in life telling me that, probably it's time to shut it down.
And you missed OTAs in spring. I remember that phone call from Lovey saying,
Yeah.
"Are you coming?" It was very important for us to have our child naturally.
Yeah.
We studied the Bradley method. There was going to be no epidural. There was going to be the best start to his life. That was very important to you. Again, always sacrificing for our family and, trying to do what's right. No C-section scheduled, as the Bears said we should have done. Do you think that affected your time with the Bears? I always felt some regret, or I felt there was something that maybe the Bears said it's over because you didn't show up to that spring training.
Yeah, well, I think there's always context, right? The season that I had with them didn't end up very well. And so, um, I'm sure they weren't completely thrilled with the way I played um, towards the second half of that season. And, when the off-season workouts were scheduled to begin, our due date for Jet was somewhere near the beginning of April. Of course, we didn't know exactly, but I remember, our off-season workouts were to start on April 1st. And so I remember,
April Fools, I'm not coming.
yeah. Uh, and so, I remember having a conversation. Obviously, my standing with the team wasn't probably what it should have been just because, again, I didn't perform the way I needed to play. And so I didn't really have a lot of leverage as far as, not showing up to off-season workouts. But now I'm not going to say I had a conversation with one of the coaches. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was highly suggestive that I show up to off-season workouts. And I remember saying, hey, well, Jen's due and really want to make sure that I'm there. Like this is my first son that I'm there for his birth. We know it's going to be within the first couple weeks. I'll come to off-season workouts after he's born. And I remember there was a suggestion, well, hey, you can schedule a C-section. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. It's just off-season workouts. I'll be there when my son is born. Okay. Well, Jet was born on April 10th. And then I don't know if you remember, but shortly thereafter, my grandmother passed away. And
Mhm.
so instead of missing the first couple weeks, I missed the first month.
Yeah.
And then the draft comes, and then they draft a safety in the fourth round. And then it's like, well, Adam hasn't been here, out of sight, out of mind. And then that's when they called me and told me, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. And, in essence, they were going to cut me and get rid of me. So, who knows if that would have happened still if I was there for off-season workouts, but certainly, if their last taste of me was at the end of the season and that wasn't good. And when they hadn't seen me in the off season, I'm sure it was a pretty easy organizational decision in order to move on, and that's just the way it went. So
When
uh,
you meet up with Lovey now, do you guys ever talk about those days? Did you ever ask him that question? Would he ever tell you?
we haven't really talked about that because, it's not, I don't really hold any grudges
No, not
or
grudges, but isn't it just information that you want to sort of like put it to rest in your own mind? Because I think about it.
I don't think it's I know how the NFL works. And
I don't.
so, to me,
Maybe
it's
I should
kind
ask Lovey.
it's kind of irrelevant. It's just,
Cutthroat.
it's a bottom line business. And if you don't perform the way you're supposed to perform, regardless of the reason, injury or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Teams, they make their decisions whether or not to move on or not. And sometimes it's fair, sometimes it's not, but it really is irrelevant whether it's fair or not. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really bother me. Again, I think that probably mentally and spiritually, it was probably time for my career to end, and that's the way it ended. Now, I wasn't, you know, it's better to not get released
Hmm.
for the last time, the year of the biggest financial collapse in the history of the world in 2008. So
Yeah.
the timing could have been a lot better, but
And you had a baby on the way.
and I had a baby. Well, he was due, or he was already born. But hey, you talk about transition in life. That one came fast, and that's just the way it goes.
So we had the economy collapsed. You have a son named Jet. And so I feel like I know Jet was a blessing. And I think your football career, like you said, would have ended either way because of where you were spiritually, passion, and just your body, just your head, everything just couldn't move forward anymore. So tell me a little bit about that transition, what that gave you. I feel like it gave you a second purpose. And maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I feel like Jet gave you purpose again. And it kind of, I know a lot of guys, when they get out of the league, they kind of lose themselves. I've seen it happen with different marriages of people we know and things like that. So how would you say that it helped you?
But things had not been going well for a couple years, in the NFL. I had the Washington experience. I had the Chicago experience. Those two, again, it's all relative. But two of the lowest points, at least in my life, that I've experienced, the complete, um,
Well, people can have low points, but when you have to read about it in newspapers, and I was part of that, it was heartbreaking. And when you hear commentators talk the way they do, it really could kill
yeah,
your soul.
yeah, again, but you gotta have a foundation of who you really are. And again, if listen, it's easier said than done. You can't live through to gain validation from other people. If that's your primary source of joy and happiness, then it's the wrong thing. And
And you're never going to get it.
it's easy to get caught up in, but you can never experience true joy or true happiness if that's where your validation comes. Listen, I think that as far as Jet coming, I just remember I wasn't proud of the person that I was leading up to that point. And once I finally realized that, hey, football is going to be done, I just had this tremendous instinct to say, you know what? I've been pretty selfish um, up to this point. My whole world has been about me and what I want, with pretty much disregard for anybody else, including you. Not in a negative way, but I
No, I get
I
it.
didn't treat you that. I wasn't that great to be around. Obviously there was no abuse or anything like that, but just as far as really giving what you needed spiritually and mentally, and just being there as a significant other, I fell way short. But I just had this overwhelming feeling that I was so selfish, and maybe for good reason, I don't know, but that it was time. to start being a servant. And this is kind of goes back to what the things that I talked about with Gil and being a Christian, of what it really means to be a servant and to be there for, like, okay, now it has to be about other people. Now it has to be about my wife. I have to be the best husband I could possibly be. I have to be the best father I could possibly be. I may not know what that means or what it looks like, but I have to commit to it, right? And you can never achieve those things. You don't have to have the answers on how to get there, but you can never achieve those things if you don't put your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul into committing to being that. So I had a commitment that I have to be the best husband. I have to be the best father.
And you were sometimes too much. You did everything for Jet and myself during my pregnancy, during his birth. I mean, so many things. I can't even tell you.
That's kind of you because I still feel like I fall short.
No, I,
We
and I
have a
think you're
long way to
always going to be
go.
hard. You're always going to be hard on yourself, and I'm hard on myself. But I think that's when people need to tell us, like, thank you. You did everything. You researched, how to, what was the book we read? I don't even know it because you read it. Sleep, in 10 days. What was it like? Have your newborn sleeping in 10 days?
No, yeah, it was one of
I
those.
mean, you're the one that read that book. You're the one that found the cute little swaddles to swaddle him. And you did all that. Again, it's like you poured all of your passion and soul and research into us. And it was amazing. And I feel like it gave you purpose. You weren't one of these guys that were completely lost because you were so busy trying to play catch up in our relationship and in life. I think that it really was a gift, our firstborn, and then the football career ending. I think a lot of guys, and I don't want to speak for guys, but I think they miss out on that because you're so busy, in your career. And the NFL is, I mean, anything like that is like you said, there's no balance really. And if you have balance, then you got to choose one or the other. And that's why I feel like I always tried to give you, I was never wanting to be the distraction. I never wanted to feel like needy and I need this and that. And I think that's why we worked, because even though we were together, we kind of just focused on what we need to focus. And then if it kind of worked out, it did. And if it didn't, then we understood it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
You see, like you disagree.
no, I agree with a lot of things that you're saying. I think I really do think that a lot of athletes have a hard time transitioning because you've gotten your whole life has been dedicated to this image of who you are and what you do and your value, like in every way, your relationships, the way how much you get paid, the attention you get is all dictated on this persona of who you are as a player. You're just a commodity. And when that's gone, and not everybody's career ends on a bad note. Many people, retire and they're perfectly happy with when and how it ended up. But too many guys that I know are bitter about their
Mhm.
career and they're bitter about how things ended. And I've noticed that the guys that have the easier time transitioning are the guys that stop clinging on to that image of being this player. And
Mhm.
that's not who you are. I'm something that's bigger than that. That's something that I did. That's something that I enjoy doing, but that certainly doesn't define who I am in my relationships with other people. And so it is a hard transition. The real world is very difficult to find meaning and to find value after you played professional sports. But if you're clinging to that former person, that person in the past, it's going to be very challenging, next to impossible for you to move forward and get joy and get value from what you're doing currently with your relationships.
Would you say any of it was luck? I know that there were a lot of people that came into your life and it seemed like the universe was working for you. Do you think any of this, like some people are just like, oh, you got lucky?
I think there is there is a certain amount of luck that's involved in people's lives, whether it's
Because I
luck.
don't believe in luck. I don't.
Well, luck, listen, we can get into a deep philosophical conversation here. Whether it's luck or opportunity or taking advantage of things when they present themselves. Listen, I think about, I don't know, is it luck? Look, we talk about this all the time, you and I. I was born and I grew up for 7 years in Green River, Wyoming. Okay, it's a town of about 7,000 people or so, and really, if you grow up in that town, the best jobs are mining jobs, and so that's really what you go on to do if you live in that town. Now, when I was 7 years old, my mom and my sister and I moved to Arizona. Well, if we stayed in Green River, Wyoming, there's a good chance, and I say this quite honestly, that I'd be working in a mine right now. I wouldn't be talking to you. You'd be off with somebody that's more handsome and a better husband and gave you more beautiful
Oh,
children.
stop.
But, again, is that luck? The way your life unfolds, there's a lot of different things that can happen. And I find it very hard to believe. Okay. If we never moved to Arizona, I wouldn't have been 15 minutes away from Jay. I wouldn't have
Mhm.
been able to drive to Arizona State and get to play or get to see and learn under Pat Tillman, to see that it could be possible. So many things in your life, you don't know why it happens. Certainly your work ethic has something to do with it, but there is some sort of a divine plan, whether you call it the way God intends it or luck. I do think there is something, some people do benefit by circumstances that aren't driven completely by their work ethic. So I do think there is a part of that. Whether it's luck or something else, who knows what it is. But I, it's hard for me to sit here and say everything is purely just because I worked hard. There certainly have been some fortunate circumstances that have happened in my life, but I've also been able to take advantage of those.
All right, let's talk about CBS, NFL boot camp. Again, you're the underdog. I remember this like it was yesterday. Tell me a little bit about the process, how you were asked the NFL boot camp, and how that went, and just who believed in you, who didn't believe in you, and how hard that was or how easy it was. I don't know.
Well, as you know, being social and outgoing and extroverted wasn't one of my specialties. And certainly most people who knew me for the first 25, 30 years of my life would say that the TV probably isn't the natural career path, for somebody like me. Really struggled uh, with a certain amount of social anxiety and really never felt comfortable in large groups. And so, obviously I didn't know what I wanted to do after I was done playing football. I do think that coaching had a strong pull for me.
I remember you mountain biked a lot. You climbed mountains a lot.
Yeah.
What else did you do?
Brazilian
Golfed a
Jiu-Jitsu.
lot.
Yeah.
You hung out
Jiu-Jitsu.
having breakfast at the breakfast club a lot.
Yeah. But at least professionally, you gotta earn a living, right? And so I thought probably the ultimate place for me is to be a coach. But then I remembered my first promise and my first priority, and that was to be, the best husband and best father I could be. And I didn't believe that if I went into coaching, I could give you, and at that time it was only one kid, it was just Jet, but I didn't believe I could give my family the presence needed for me to be a great football coach and to live up to my promise of being a husband and dad first. So I thought, you know what, TV would be a great gig, right? And if I could do it, well, I show up to the NFL broadcast boot camp, which is it
But
was
what went through your mind? I mean, you get an email and they always have different things for you guys to do. Like, were you like, oh, this sounds interesting, or I could do this, or I still want to be part of the game? Like, what was? What was the reason you even gave it a second look, considering what you just told me?
I just felt like I had a unique eye for the game and I had a unique perspective for the game. And I felt like I saw it differently than most. And so I felt like I would be good at it.
Mhm.
Um, and so when the NFL the NFL has a lot of different programs for post career, second career things, and NFL broadcast boot camp was something they put together that was they took 20 to 25 former players, some current players, and they assembled, a lot of the major media executives, in the country and put us through kind of a boot camp and showed us the ropes. Really kind of an advanced job fair. If you do well there, a lot of times you'll get a broadcasting gig out of it. And so a little did I know that I was terrible at it. And so
Do you
when I
remember
went,
who told you you were terrible?
pretty much everybody, but it, I remember, they told us when the first night that we got there, they gave us, six or seven topics, and they said, pick one out of a hat, study it, and then, tomorrow you're going to do a studio segment with James Brown, like an NFL Today segment with James
What
Brown.
was your topic?
I believe it was at that time, it was when Dante Stallworth, he had that accident, that drinking and driving accident where I think he had just served his, I don't remember the details of it, but and I think he just signed with the Ravens, and it was basically, should he play or something regarding that. And I just remember when I did my segment, it was so bad, my heart was pounding, and I just kept hearing them say, louder, your voice. And so that I started shouting and just it got so bad that I actually froze and I had to
Mhm.
redo my take. And they said, we're going to get together and do this and play this segment American Idol style, and you're going to get critiqued by three media executives. And one was from CBS, one was from ESPN, and one was from NBC. And I just remember watching that video in front of everybody in that auditorium. I was mortified. It was so bad. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but you asked me that night in my hotel room how it went. I said, well, not very good. And I even remember saying, the guy from CBS was, our current executive producer, Harold Bryant, who's still there now.
Yeah.
And I remember, I could tell you what, I'll never work for CBS because that guy killed me. Um, and so I just remember it was almost the same mentality that happened when I didn't get a scholarship. I felt sorry for myself for a minute, but then I'm like, you know what? I got pissed. And I got pissed not because like I did bad, but I just felt like a coward. I felt like I was so worried about what everybody thought, and I was so insecure, and I was so like it was me who stood in my own way of accomplishing this goal of getting into television. I'm like, how pathetic is that you're going to be so nervous, you're going to destroy all your chances. Well, pretty much everybody there said, TV isn't for you and you're not going to make it. You should find something else. And they're pretty
Did
blunt.
that drive you
You know,
more?
that didn't drive me more so I failed because of me.
Mhm.
I wasn't mad at them. It was like, wait a minute. Like I failed because I'm being soft. Like stop. Like that's why I was so upset. And so I remember saying, you know what? I'm gonna do what it takes. I'm gonna make it in television.
So that started another journey of you just working on yourself and trying to get better. And I remember some of that process. You got with a voice coach who was very instrumental. And I used to hear you in your office talking in different tones. It was like crazy. And then our good friend Tim Ring had you on his show. And I was just mortified watching. I was there with your cousin Stoss, our cousin, and we were just watching, and you were crossing your legs and you were shouting. And I was like, oh my gosh, just stop. Just like, this is so painful.
Yeah.
And Tim kept having you on, which I thought was great. It was like reps in the gym. And tell me a little bit about that and how you felt about that. And I just saw you get better and better, but it wasn't just like some tough love, you talking to yourself saying, get it together. It was putting in again the grind.
Yeah.
Again, taking time and just dedicating yourself and being disciplined and, getting outside your own insecurities. So tell me a little bit about that. And also people don't know this, but you worked for free for a lot of years. You traveled and you did these college games. I did not know this, but you commentated at a high school football game. You were the commentator at a football game at a high school. You used to commentate for arena football. Not that any of this is bad. I mean, it all helps you grow and it gives you reps and people see you. But tell me a little bit about that journey, what that was like. Was there pressure from yourself? Like, oh my gosh, I got to start earning a living. Like, we're going on what year is it? And I'm still not getting paid.
Yeah. There was certainly no guarantee that it was going to work out. In fact, the odds said that it probably wasn't going to work out because, in this business, um, there's a lot of jobs, but there's not a lot of jobs that pay the kind of money that after you've been making over seven figures, um, it's hard to find those jobs in the real world. And so there was no guarantee whatsoever that it was going to work out. This goes back to what we talked about earlier about the foundation and the journey. If I didn't have the foundation and the reps of what I had to do as that high school junior, high school senior, all throughout college, of putting in the work and just committing and being all in on something. I went back to that 17-year-old and said, this is how I'm going to attack broadcasting. And so again, that foundation that I laid the foundation of my broadcasting career. And so um, you have to humble yourself. You have to I had the mentality that I would never say no to any job, that I was never above any job, that a lot of guys wouldn't do what I did because it would be beneath them. But to me, it was just getting reps at any at all cost. And yeah, it took a long time before I made any, I would say 5, 6, 7 years before I really made any enough money at least to support our way of life. So there was a lot of uncertainty, but I just again I had a belief, and I just knew deep down in my heart that if I really committed, if I really was all in, that I would figure out a way to make it. I didn't know how long it was going to take, but I just knew, like, just stay the course and keep going all in, and it's going to work out. And it took a long time, but you could say that it did finally work out.
And you had to trust the process. And I think, a lot of our friends and family have said that, it's made you a better person. It's actually helped you internally become a better person, a better friend. Like you said, you had some social anxiety. You're the one that's like a social butterfly now. I'm more a homebody. So I do like this new Adam. I'm exhausted. So it's like I let you go be the social butterfly now. But so you missed the birth of our second child, Hawk, because you were in Eugene, Oregon. Tell me about that and that phone call. Again, it was like we were just trying to get through the process. We have a baby on the way. You've got to take off for the weekend. And what happens?
Yeah, I think this story says a little bit more about you, your perseverance.
Well, I
I
guess
had
like
I
I
had
guess
the
it's the
easy part.
sacrifices, the
I,
sacrifices you make.
yeah. Well, my it was a little easier on me. But yeah, listen, that was when that was my first actual real job. I didn't get paid that much, but it was my first real job with the Pac-12 network. And it was one of the first games of the year. And so I had been doing regional stuff for like high school games here locally. And I remember you and I having a conversation. You've been through the process before, so you kind of knew what pregnancy and labor was all about. We knew that the due date was soon, but we figured we had some time. And so I was on my way to Eugene to do an Oregon game. and your mom was coming in kind of to replace me to be on duty. And I just remember it was about I get in about 1 o'clock in the morning and I call you and I ask you how you're doing. And you say, hey, I'm great, just getting ready to go to bed. And so I go to bed. And then all of a sudden, about 4 hours later, I hear my phone blowing up like crazy. I have like 30 missed text messages. I have missed calls. And the first text that I see was from our cousin Laura and said, oh my God, Hawk was born. He's amazing. And I'm like, what just happened? Like I went to bed 4 hours ago and now my son is here. Like, and I finally got a hold of you and, you're like, oh my God, there's blood everywhere. And so I finally get a hold of him. I couldn't get a hold of you. I get a hold of my cousin. She's like, oh my God, Hawk was born at home. There's blood everywhere. Everything's okay. And I'm like, holy crap, what is happening? Um, and so, obviously, I mean, it's more your story from there that point on. Again, it was much easier for me. But yeah, Hawk was born spontaneously, and you and your mom had to navigate that. Having been born in the bathroom and the umbilical cord breaking, and being born in the amniotic sac, and um, while I was just busy getting my rest and sleeping.
So then we finally get to talk, and then I send you pictures, and then you said, I'm coming home. And do you remember what my words were to you?
I do. And listen, you've been interviewing me, and again, you've been showering me with a lot of compliments,
Well,
but
that's my job. And this
it's
is
hard.
really hard. This is not hard to do. I need to listen more. I like it.
But listen, you can't do what I've done without having a tremendous, supportive, significant other and wife. Um, you would, well, that's very, very a traumatic, almost a life-threatening situation that you were just a part of. And I remember talking to you and saying, hey, I can get on a flight. I can get home around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, whatever. And I just remember you saying, honestly, everything's fine. I'm fine. Hawk is fine. Everybody's healthy. You should probably just finish the job this weekend. Right. And like, that's kind of a crazy thing to say. And I didn't feel very comfortable doing it. But I mean, that says a lot about who you are, not necessarily me. Like again, I had the easy part in this story. This is more I'd rather be me in this story than you for sure.
Well, I wasn't trying to pat myself on the back, but what I was getting to was so many sacrifices, right? You don't get back that moment, and you were gone, you
Yeah.
know, and it's hard, but you know, it's just the way it had to be, right? And so you've sacrificed so much, for our family and things like that. I just like again, it's like you're always this inspiration and this love and light, and we just love you.
Oh,
Couple more questions. Do you think it's harder to get in the NFL now than it was when you were trying to get in?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. Um, I would tend to say yes, because I look at guys now and just we're dealing with some genetically unbelievable athletes, specimens. I felt like for the most part when I played, you certainly had your freaks of nature. But at the same time, you look around the locker room and guys kind of still looked kind of normal,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense. But I feel like right now, when I go to visit teams in practice, and I visit teams, and I stand there on the field next to them, I see them warm up in pregame. Man, these guys are really good. I mean, they're all big, they're all fast, they're all strong. It doesn't matter what position you play. It seems to me, and I don't know if it's my perception or not, but it just seems to me that physically across the board, there's just bigger, faster, stronger athletes than there were when I played. Now, I could be wrong, but it
Mm-hmm.
just seems like they are getting so good. But at the same time, I guess at the lower levels in high school and college, um, they're much more advanced than we were as well. So I think it's just a natural evolution of where we are in society. But um, there's a lot of good, talented, unbelievable players that are out there today.
Is there anybody you look at nowadays that reminds you of yourself that you see coming out of a college or fresh in the NFL that I know you don't like to compare yourself or things like that? Is there somebody that you see yourself in?
I don't know. It's hard for me. I don't know if I pay that close of attention. And again, I don't, I think that what I did a lot of really cool things. Um, but then again, I, I don't look at myself as, I don't associate myself with the game like that anymore. I just feel like I've moved on and I'm really content with where I am in life and my position in life. And so it's not really about me. It's just I enjoy watching people that are really good at what they do perform. And I enjoy this part of the job and a chance to really talk to people. I get a chance to talk to the best coaches and players in the world on a weekly basis. And so I'm more interested in learning about what makes them tick, what makes them great, their experiences. And I'm more in a place where I want to learn from other people rather than, kind of focus on the cool stuff that I did.
So you're not an Al Bundy.
Uh,
All those awards in your background right now.
yeah, I try I try not to be I try not to be
No,
enough.
I don't think you are. I think you're very humble, actually.
Yeah.
So was the dream all what it was all cracked up to be from that 4-year-old little boy?
And listen, I've gotten a chance to live an extraordinary life. Football has been good to me. Football has been life-changing for me. Not just, again, to me, uh, you love the reward of playing, right? But honestly, the gift of work, um, the gift of ultimate belief in yourself, the gift of infinite commitment to what you're trying to do, uh, the extreme nature of being all in on something. I think about our kids, and I certainly want them to be able to accomplish great things, but I want them to feel and understand what it feels like to just give it all you got.
Mhm.
Whether you make it or not, right? But just what it feels like to just give it everything, to just commit to it and have this belief that no matter what happens, that you're going to be able to find a way to overcome it. And it's not going to be easy and you're going to get your butt kicked and there's going to be massive failures. But I think that to go through that process, years of really finding out about yourself and what you're capable of is the best gift of all. And so no, I don't regret. I do it all again
What was
because
the dream? Was it what you thought it was? That 4-year-old little boy, if he could just fast forward, were you like, all
well,
right,
you know what? I'm not the only one to say this. You hear this from a lot of people out there, but you realize that the reward wasn't the gift at all, right? So like you're young, you want to play in the NFL. What does that mean? You want to be a professional baseball player or an astronaut or whatever it is that seems impossible. And so your whole life you're working to get there. But then once you're there, at least for me anyways, what I value most was the process. And I do think the process is the gift. I think that, if you look at anything that you're proud of in life, is the things that seemed impossible, the hardships that you faced that you at the time you didn't really know if you could get through it or not. And again, mine were, some people have real hardships. Mine wasn't a hardship. But just when you're able to overcome those things, the more impossible something seems to be, and you're able to find a way to get through it and get to the other side, those to me are the things that you're most proud of. And to me, I think that you get the most value out of. So, um,
and I
yeah,
think nowadays people want to fast forward. They don't want to go through the process. It's like, you know, immediate gratification. They want to wake up and be big. They want to wake up, they want to be strong, but it all comes from discipline and it's the little habits every day that bring you to those big moments. But a lot of people don't get that.
I think that today. I think it's the same, whether it's today or 20 years ago. Today may be a little different because of social media and you get you're watching more of other people's dreams and goals instead of imagining your own. I think that's something that our generation really benefited from is all we had was our imagination. And
Mhm.
so the importance and how powerful your imagination really is and how influential that is as opposed to seeing other people's content, other people's creation, other people's life on a daily basis through social media. Um, so I think there are challenges of today, but at the same time, man, I just want to see people just give it all you got, not for validation from anybody else that you're going to get,
Mhm.
but just pour your heart and your soul into something and just don't ever stop and see what happens. And it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over the course, but if you commit to it and play the long game, to me at least, it's pretty rewarding.
So last question, when it's all quiet, no cameras, no football, no titles, do you feel proud of the man you've become?
I'll say this. I'm glad. I am proud of the fact that I've been able to do what I said I was going to do in many, 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 many places. I do think that it's been pretty cool to really set out and really to become among one of the best in the world in at least two industries, football and then broadcasting. I'm one of 16, 17 people who get a chance to do NFL games on Sundays. It's pretty cool. I've been able to do that, but at the same time, when I set out to do it, not only was I average, but the odds were probably zero of me ever accomplishing that goal. So I do have a lot of satisfaction from that. But I also, the person that I was back when you and I met, I'm not proud of that person. I am proud that I've been able to evolve and grow as an actual man. Like being a man is different than being a great football player or what you are professionally. I do think I have grown tremendously as a man, and I am proud of the growth that I've been able to make in that standpoint, and really trying to make an impact not only for you, our kids, but also try to be a role model and have a chance to mentor and influence other kids that are out there in the community. So I do have a sense of pride that I've grown, but I still. I still wake up every day and I still feel like I'm falling short and that there's much more to do. And so I don't want to just let the time go by because if you don't pay attention, it moves fast.
Mhm.
Just getting the most out of every day, it really is what's important.
If only you could pick up those socks and throw them in the hamper.
Yes, you wouldn't like me if I was perfect, so I gotta
Mm.
give you something, hon.
All right, last thing. I have pup of the podcast where I'm gonna have a dog or a puppy on the podcast that we're gonna hopefully find a home for. Why do you have so many animals?
Is it you?
I just thought I'd ask that. But you do love them and you do, they come home and it's kind of like, oh, you better not have a dog in there. But your love for animals is no secret. But I would like for you to do the honor to talk about pup of the podcast. Can you do that for us?
So, as the pup of the podcast, this is
Who,
Zion.
who we might bring home. No, I'm kidding. I bet you if your mom sees this, she'll bring him home.
Probably, yes. So Zion is friendly, he's full of personality and has so much love to give. Even with his old man's body, he knows how to sit, shake. He loves people, needs a comfy home for his golden years. The shelter is taking a toll on him. And if you're looking for a very loyal senior companion, his ID number is A5125260. And you can visit him at 1920 South Lewis, Mesa, Arizona 85210.
Yeah, Maricopa County Animal Control East Shelter in Mesa. And hopefully somebody can adopt Zion. And we'll update you on these adoptions too. All right, Adam, thanks for finally coming on. I hope to see you soon and have you on again. It was so hard to get this nailed down, but I'm glad we did it. And I really enjoyed getting to know a lot of things that I kind of knew, but we never really talk like this. And I think we need to do it more often. And, I love who you were and who you've become. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do in the future.
Well, maybe instead of going out for dinner, we can just have little podcast dates.
We could even have it in the same room next time.
Wow, I'd really enjoy that. I don't know. Did you learn anything that you didn't know?
There were some things. I mean, we never talked about the ambulance ride. I would like to, hear more about how you felt. Were you scared? How you felt that night when you went to bed. There's so many. I mean, I could probably do this for a couple hours. Our kids will kill us. But I really, really enjoyed this. And, again, too, just seeing you with CBS and the work that goes into what you do, and people don't understand. They just think that, the TV's on and the game's on, and you're just like talking about different players. Just to know how to pronounce some of their names. I hear you saying it over and over again in your office just to make sure you get their name right, their position, what college they went to. And you're like this mad Picasso in there with these crazy game boards printing. I'm never allowed to use your printer because God forbid I use your, printer ink up. You'll, go crazy. So it's just you. And I could just, people are probably going to want to vomit. I just love you so much. You inspire me every day. You may not think it. I might not tell you enough. And hopefully if we got anything from this podcast, just even if you and I get it, it's the fact that you inspire me. Nothing gets unnoticed that you do, even the socks on the floor, whatever. You think all the bad stuff. But when I see you and I see you work and I see you work for our family, there's just gratitude, love, and honor. That's
Oh,
it.
well,
Now I'm going to start crying, and I don't
I'm
cry.
gonna, I'm gonna have to do a podcast so I can start talking about you in the
Oh,
same.
yeah.
So,
Well,
well, I love you,
I,
babe.
I love you too. Signing off.